They left, not with a fight, not with honesty, not even with the decency of goodbye, just left. One moment they were there close, open, present, and the next gone. No warning, no clarity. Just an echo of what felt real now, collapsing into confusion. You stood there with your soul exposed, your truth on the table, and they didn't even flinch because they didn't even stay long enough to witness it. And what you do with that kind of absence? What do you do when you're left holding conversations that never finished, questions that never got answered, emotions that never got resolved? You rewind moments in your head. You try to find where it all shifted. You blame your intensity. You analyze your words. You apologize to a silence that never asked for one. But it wasn't you. It was never you. They left not because you were too much, but because they weren't ready to feel what you awakened. Because real presence, real intimacy requires a strength most people haven't built yet. It demands the tearing down to go, the surrender of control, the kind of nakedness that goes far deeper than the physical. And for many, that's terrifying. So instead of rising to meet your honesty, they retreat into what they know: avoidance, distraction, escape, not because they didn't feel something, but because they did. You shook something inside them. You stirred the part they've spent years burying. You reminded them of what they've been trying not to need. And rather than step into that fire with you, they ran from the heat, chose comfort. They chose safety. They chose silence. And now here you are, still standing in the space they abandoned, still holding on to threads, hoping they'll turn into something again, still trying to make peace with an echo. But the longer you wait for closure, the deeper you dig into your own soul to fill the hole they left. And that's the part they'll never see. How hard it is to grieve someone who is still alive, someone who still breathes but doesn't speak, someone who once opened up and then slammed the door shut without warning. It's emotional whiplash. It's abandonment without explanation. It's being left in limbo. And that's a cruel place to be because it doesn't let you move on, but it doesn't let you stay either. You're stuck in the in-between what was and what could be, and you almost and never between the depth you felt and the void they left behind. But this is where it shifts. Right here, right now. Because this pain, it's not yours to carry forever. This silence, it does not define you. This ending without an ending, it's not the end of you. You are not someone to be paused and forgotten. You are not someone who only mattered in temporary spaces. You are not someone whose value disappears when someone else's fear gets loud. You were present. You were real. You showed up with truth and with heart, and that is something to be proud of, not something to feel shame for. They couldn't meet you there, not because you asked for too much, but because they offered too little. They didn't leave because you were too deep. They left because they were too shallow to swim it. So don't dim your fire to someone else's flicker. Don't fold your heart because someone else couldn't hold it. Don't wait for words that were never courageous enough to be spoken. You have nothing to prove to silence. You have nothing to fix in their leaving. You have everything to reclaim in yourself. Let this be your turning point, not the place you broke, but the place you were forged, because every time someone walks away, every time someone leaves you hanging, every time you're left with nothing but your own breath, that's the moment you find what they never did: your own power, your own voice. Let them leave. Let them run. Let them hide from the mirror you became. You don't need to chase what already showed you it can't stay. You don't need to hold space for those who can't even hold themselves. And you certainly don't need to shrink your soul just to fit into someone else's fear. They left, but you remain, and that's where the real story begins. They miss you. They do. Even if they've never said it. Even if their lips are sealed and their eyes look away. Even if their world now moves as if you were never in it. The truth doesn't always make noise. Sometimes it sits silently in the corners of their day, waiting to be acknowledged. But they won't, because acknowledging it would mean admitting what they lost, admitting that they walked away from something real. And that kind of honesty, it's heavy, it's sharp, it cuts deeper than any silence ever could. So they carry it quietly, like a weight in the chest, like a name they whisper in their mind but never say out loud. They miss the way you saw through them without trying to fix them. The way your presence demanded their presence. The way you weren't afraid of the messy parts. You were rare. Not because you were perfect, but because you were true. And truth is terrifying to someone who has spent their life hiding from it. They miss you in the way they avoid everything that reminds them of you. In the way they rush past the places you existed together. In the way they try to bury their feelings under distractions, noise, tasks, shallow connections. But even distraction can't quiet the pull of what was once real. Because when the room gets quiet, when their world stops spinning, you return, not as a ghost, but as a presence they can't shake. They remember you, not just the moments, but the energy. Not just what you said, but how you made them feel safe, alive, seen, and yet they hide. They tuck that HE into places no one will see, because vulnerability was never their language. Because longing feels too much like weakness in a world that taught them to stay guarded. So they pretend. They pretend not to feel, not to remember, not to miss. But you cannot feel what shook you to your core. You cannot know someone who showed you what genuine connection tastes like. They miss you in every quiet moment. They miss you in the spaces they now fill with noise. They miss you in the opportunities they let slip away because they couldn't stand still long enough to face what was real. And here's the painful truth. Missing you doesn't mean they'll come back. Missing you doesn't mean they'll apologize. Missing doesn't mean they've changed. Because some people would rather live with the H than face the mirror you became. You were not just a person. You were a reflection. You were the light they didn't know how to hold. And instead of stepping into it, but that turning away, it cost them. And even if they'll never admit it, they feel it deeply because what you gave wasn't common. What you offered wasn't surface. And what you are cannot be replaced by shallow affection or empty company. You left a mark, not because you tried talk, but because you showed up fully. You gave from your core. You opened without playing games, without manipulating. You saw them, and they weren't ready to be seen. So now they sit with the emptiness they chose, the silence they created, the distance they built to protect themselves from depth. And you have every right to feel the H of being missed in silence, but you don't owe your life to that H. You don't have to wait for a return that may never come. You don't have to make yourself small hoping they'll find the courage they lacked before. Their longing isn't your responsibility. Their regret isn't your weight to carry. Their hidden missing doesn't have to keep you trapped in pause. Because here's the shift. You can be missed and still move on. You can be remembered and still release. You can be deeply felt and still choose yourself. Let them miss you. Let them H. Let them wrestle in silence what they let slip away. You don't have to close the loop for them. You don't have to fix what they broke in fear. You are enough. You are enough. And if someone can only value in your absence, then let your absence speak louder than your presence ever did. Because true power isn't in being chased. It's in knowing when to stop waiting. It's in knowing that being missed is not the same as being loved fully. It's in knowing that being remembered doesn't mean you have to return. They miss you deeply, but you are not a memory. You are a force still moving, a heart still expanding, a life still unfolding. And that life is yours to live. Unapologetically, unchained, unbound, them ache. Let yourself rise. They hide it all, every feeling, every ripple of regret, every surge of emotion that once threatened to rise when you were near. You would never know by looking at them. They seem fine, composed, focused, detached. But don't be fooled by appearances. People get good at hiding. So good, they start believing their own masks. They convince the world, and sometimes even themselves, that they've moved on, that nothing touches them, that they never felt what you did. But you felt it. You saw the flicker in their eyes, the hesitation in their voice, the way they lingered for just a second too long. You know when something was real, know when energy shifts, and you know that what was shared between you wasn't one-sided. They just buried it before they had to confront it. Because confronting it would have meant changing. It would have meant cracking open the hard shell of detachment they built to survive. And survival has been their mode for a long time. They hide behind logic, behind reason, behind every narrative that keeps them safe from the truth. They replace stories that paint them in control. It wasn't the right time. I needed to focus on myself. It wasn't that serious. But behind every excuse is a silent screaming. I wasn't ready. I didn't know how to hold what you offered. I was scared. Fear hides in all kinds of masks. Indifference, ambition, distance. And the better someone becomes at hiding, the less they have faced the consequences of what they avoid. But hiding isn't healing. Silence isn't peace. Pretending isn't power. And what they hide is this: they felt more than they could manage. You woke something up in them, something buried honest, something tender they didn't know still existed. It shook their identity, threatened the narrative they had built, that they were unshakable, unattached, uninvested. But real connection doesn't play by those rules. Real connection cracks things open. And when it did, they ran back to the comfort of numbness, because numbness is safe. Numbness asks for nothing. Numbness doesn't require courage. They hide it all, because admitting they felt something would require admitting they lost something. And admitting they lost something would require admitting they wanted something. But wanting, that's too close to needing, too close to vulnerability, to the edge of being seen. So they tuck it all away. Smiles in public, busy schedules, new people, new conversations that sound full but feel empty, because you don't replace connection like an object. You can't substitute depth with distraction and call it closure. They hide because hiding gives them the illusion of control. They hide because facing you would mean facing themselves. They hide because the version of them met you wasn't ready to be real. And yet, none of that is your burden to carry. You do not need to wait for their revelation. You do not need to hope for their breakthrough. You do not need to pause your life in the shadow of someone else's denial, because someone's ability to hide does not make your truth any less real. Their silence does not erase what was shared. Their absence does not mean you imagine the depth you felt. You're not here to convince someone to feel. You're not here to excavate buried hearts. You're not here to unmask someone who isn't ready to be seen. Let them hide. Let them lie behind the walls they built long before you arrived. Let them make choices that keep them safe, but small. Because while they're hiding, you're growing. While they're pretending, you're healing. While they're denying, you're choosing clarity, truth, and movement. This isn't about who feels more. This isn't about who reaches out first. This is about integrity. Yours. It's about who has the courage to be real in a world addicted to escape. You are not a secret. You are not someone to be shelved until they're ready. You are not an emotion to be folded up and hidden in their emotional attic. You are a mirror, not the problem. You are the reflection of what they couldn't yet accept in themselves. And mirrors don't chase. Mirrors don't beg. Mirrors wait for readiness, but they never lower their clarity. So let them hide. Let them rehearse their control. Let them feel powerful in their silence. But never forget the truth doesn't appear just because someone can't look at it. They can hide from you. They can hide from their feelings. But they can't hide from the consequences of denying something real. And eventually, all that suppression turns into pressure. And that pressure breaks something, not any of them, you. You've already started to rise. And there's no hiding from that. This is where everything changes. They came back. Not because they finally spoke. Not because they offered answers. But because you stopped needing them. The shift doesn't begin when they explain. It doesn't begin when closure finally arrives. It begins the moment you decide you're done living in the shadow of someone else's fear. You're done dancing with silence and calling it connection. You're done mistaking absence for mystery, pain for purpose. You've been orbiting their silence, circling the space they abandoned, looking for signs in the ruins of a connection that could bend, but never truly stood. And why? Because you felt something real, because your heart was open, raw, and ready. But it takes two open hearts to build anything worth standing in. And if one is hiding, running, or playing dead, you're not in a relationship. You're in a performance. You're in a one-sided emotional gamble, And you deserve more than gambling your worth on someone else's confusion. So now the shift begins. It begins when you stop blaming yourself for their silence. It begins when you stop questioning your value just because someone else didn't have the courage to meet it. It begins when you realize someone's inability to face themselves has nothing to do with your worthiness. Read that again. Someone's inability to face themselves has nothing to do with your worthiness. They didn't walk away because you were too intense. They walked away because your intensity asked them to wake up. They didn't ghost you because you were too emotional. They ghosted because your emotional truth made their numbness impossible. You were not a problem. You were a mirror. And some people would rather smash the mirror and see the truth of who they've become. But you're done standing in broken glass, trying to make sense of their reflection. You're done bleeding for someone who never even looked down to notice. You're done handing your power over to the quiet. Because here's what silence taught you. You don't need permission to move forward. You don't need validation from the person who vanished. You don't need the closure that never came. Closure isn't something you wait for. It's something you create, and you create it right now. With every decision that says, I will not shrink, I will not beg, I'll not lower my light to make someone else comfortable in their darkness. Their silence may have delayed your healing, but it will not define your future. The pain, yes, it was real. The confusion, heavy. The loneliness crushing at times, but none of it broke you, not fully, not forever now. Something stronger is rising in the cracks, something louder than silence, something more powerful than their retreat, something rooted not in who left, but in who you're becoming. This shift, it's not about moving on with bitterness. It's about moving forward with truth. Because you don't heal by pretending it didn't matter. You heal by realizing you matter regardless of who couldn't see it. Let them stay silent. Let them miss you quietly. Let them pretend it was nothing. But you're building something unshakable. Not for them. Not to prove a point, but for your choosing presence. You're choosing clarity. You're choosing to belong to yourself again. No more checking your phone for words that won't come. No more overanalyzing what was left unsaid. No more reading old messages looking for meaning in shadows. You don't find your power by digging in the past. You find it by standing in this moment and saying, I will not wait to be chosen. I choose myself now. You don't need anyone's return to rise. You don't need their approval to grow. You don't need to be remembered by someone who forgot themselves. You only need one thing to remember who you are when no one is looking, when no one is clapping, when no one is there to affirm it. That's real power, the kind that builds from within, the kind that doesn't collapse when someone leaves, the kind that says, yes, I was hurt, but I am not staying hurt. Yes, I was left behind, but I am not staying stuck. Yes, they went quiet, but I will not go silent in my own life. This shift isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It's a steady burn. It's a reclaiming. It's you walking out of the emotional fog they left behind and into the fire of your own becoming. They had their chance. They chose silence. Now you choose something else. You choose you. This is where you rise. Not because they came back, not because they finally saw your worth, not because the pain disappeared, but because you chose yourself before their silence could define you. You've been sitting in the aftermath, in the in-between, in the place where questions echo louder than answers, and memories replay in loops you can't stop. You've been there, trying to heal through logic, trying to stitch emotional wounds with thoughts, trying to intellectualize pain that was never meant to be processed through the mind alone. But pain like this, it demands presence, it demands truth, it demands that you stop pretending you're unaffected just to seem strong. And somewhere in the stillness, you realize something quietly revolutionary. You don't need their explanation to rise. You don't need to be held to feel whole. You don't need the person who hurt you to heal you. Because your healing, it was never in their hands. It was always in yours. This isn't about pretending it didn't hurt. It did. This isn't about faking that you're over it. You're still feeling it, but feeling it is not the same as being trapped in it. You can carry your pain and still move. You can honor your hurt and still evolve. You can miss them and still choose not to go back. That's what rising really is. It's not always loud. It's not always bold. Sometimes it's quiet and sacred. Sometimes it's you choosing not to text back, not to check their profile, not to fold every time you feel weak. Sometimes rising is simply staying true to yourself, even when you feel broken. Because you've come to see you were never asking for too much. You were only asking for someone to meet you where you already stood. And they couldn't. Not because you're unworthy, but because they're still running from themselves. And now you've stopped waiting, stopped orbiting around their absence, stopped trying to decode what was never spoken. Instead, you're turning inward, rebuilding in the quiet, piece by piece, moment by moment. You're learning to validate yourself to be the voice that says, I see you, I hear you. You're allowed to feel this and still be strong. You're no longer looking for someone to save you from your own heart because you've realized your heart was never the enemy. It was the guide. It was the part of you that stayed real while the world asked you to be less. And now, finally, you're not shrinking for anyone. You're stepping into the version of you that doesn't chase what walks away. You're becoming the one who creates space for people who want to stay, not the ones who constantly test your worth through withdrawal. You're starting to pour into your own cup, to rediscover your voice, to listen to the version of you that existed before the disappointment, before the confusion, before you bent yourself backwards hoping to be chosen. That version of you, still here, still waiting, still strong, just buried beneath the noise of their silence. And now you clear the noise. Now you choose you. Now you rise, not to prove anything, not to be seen, not to make them regret, but because you're tired of abandoning yourself every time someone else does. You're no longer betraying your own heart to hold on to someone else's potential. You're no longer staying in places that drain you just because they once felt familiar. You're no longer dimming your light to comfort someone else's shadow. You are the one now, the one who shows up, the one who stays when others run, for yourself. And this rise, it's personal, it's sacred. It's yours. Not everyone will see it. Not everyone will applaud it, but you will know. You will feel it in the way you breathe deeper, in the way your voice no longer shakes when you say no, in the way you hold your own gaze without flinching. You're not the same. The silence changed you, but not in the way they thought it would. It didn't break you. It birthed you. You were never meant to stay curled up in confusion. You were meant to rise boldly, quietly, bravely, fully. Let this be your return, not to them, not to the past, but to yourself. You never lost your power. You just forgot it under the weight of someone else's distance. But now you realize they never chose you. Not fully, not when it counted, not when presence could have changed everything. They hesitated, they doubted, they backed away the moment things got real. And for far too long, you've been trying to make sense of that, trying to justify their fear, trying to give weight to their absence as if it could somehow make you whole. But not anymore. Because this, right here, right now, is the moment you choose. Not them, not their silence, not their story. You choose to stop bending yourself into versions that fit inside someone else's limitations. You choose to stop measuring your worth by the ones who walked away. You choose to stop carrying the weight of what could have been and start building what will be. This is the fire. And yes, it burns. But it burns away what no longer belongs. It burns away the excuses, the waiting hope and the endless wondering, because now clarity arrives like lightning, and with it comes choice, powerful, unapologetic, unshakable. You are not here to be chosen by someone else. You are here to choose yourself. Every time, especially when it's hard, especially when you're still aching, they made their decision to walk away, to disappear, to stay silent when they should have spoken, to hide when connection begged them to rise. But you don't have to let that define your story. You don't have to keep your life in limbo waiting for the return of someone who couldn't even stay still in the first place. You are not a side note. You are not someone to circle back to when it's convenient. You are not an almost, a maybe, or a someday. You are now. You are here. You are whole whether they ever admit it or not. And now it's time to stop looking back. Time to stop scanning the horizon for someone who turned away from the light. Time to stop asking what more you could have done. Because the truth is you already did enough. You showed up. You felt deeply. You offered something real, and they weren't ready. That's not your failure. That's their fear. And if someone cannot meet you in your fullness, you do not empty yourself to make them comfortable. You rise. You burn. You choose to stop hoping their silence will speak. Choose to stop waiting for closure from someone who couldn't even give honesty. Choose to stop abandoning yourself just to feel a trace of the connection you once had. This is your life, and you don't owe it to anyone's indecision. Let them hide. Let them age. Let them drown in the weight of their own avoidance. Let them remember you in silence. But do not return to the place where your power was lost, because your power is not in their hands. It never was. It is in every moment you choose to show up for yourself. Every time you breathe through the H without reaching out. Every time you hold the line, stay the course, and trust the unfolding. They don't have to see your growth for it to be real. They don't have to acknowledge your strength for it to change everything. They don't have to apologize for you to be free. You are not tied to their silence anymore. You are not held back by their confusion. You are not small. You are not invisible. You are not broken. And becoming takes fire. It takes pain. It takes walking away without a map and trusting that you will not be lost, but led. You are not chasing anything anymore. You're not chasing answers. You're not chasing love. You're not chasing people who flinch at the weight of real connection. You are choosing with intention, with power, with fire. So let this be your declaration. I will not wait to be chosen. I am not a backup plan. I am not an option. I am not half of anything. I am whole. And from this moment forward, I choose myself. Let them wonder. Let them wrestle. Let them replay what they lost. But you live, you rise, you create, you love yourself first. This is not the end. This is the becoming. And the fire you walk through today will be the light that leads others home tomorrow. Now go, unapologetically, unstoppably you choose, and everything changes now.